The courtroom doors burst open with enough force to rattle the brass hinges, and there she stood, my daughter Victoria, 28 years old and radiating the kind of fury that could melt steel. Her perfectly tailored business suit couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes as she spotted me sitting in the gallery's back row. "You have to sign these papers, Dad," she hissed, her voice cracking with an emotion I hadn't heard from her in 7 years. "The merger depends on it. Everything I've worked for depends on it." But I just looked at her and said quietly, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but some things are more important than money." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain hammered against my apartment window like an angry fist, each drop carrying the weight of another sleepless night. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the foreclosure notice that had arrived 3 days earlier, the red lettering seeming to pulse with each lightning flash outside. 27 years of mortgage payments, and it was all slipping away like sand through my fingers. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and at 52, I thought I understood failure. I thought I'd experienced every flavor of disappointment life could serve up. But nothing had prepared me for the call that came at 7:30 that Tuesday morning, cutting through the silence of my one-bedroom apartment like a blade through silk. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Patricia Reeves from Cromwell Academy. I'm afraid we need to discuss Victoria's tuition situation immediately." Victoria, my daughter, the brilliant, fierce, ambitious young woman who had once looked at me like I hung the stars in the sky. Now she was 28, married to a successful investment banker named Trevor Ashworth, living in a penthouse apartment that cost more per month than I made in a year. We hadn't spoken in 7 years, not since the day she stood in this same kitchen and screamed words that still echoed in my head during the darkest hours. "I'm ashamed of you, Dad, ashamed of your pathetic job, your pathetic life, your pathetic dreams. Mom was right to leave you. I'm right to leave you too." Mrs. Reeves cleared her throat, pulling me back to the present crisis. "Mr. Sullivan, Victoria's daughter Emma has been attending our preparatory program for 3 years now. However, the account is seriously delinquent. We need immediate payment of $47,000, or Emma will need to be withdrawn by Friday." Emma, my granddaughter, 8 years old, with Victoria's fierce intelligence and what I imagined might be my stubborn streak. I'd never met her. Victoria had made sure of that. My own flesh and blood, growing up in private schools and country clubs, never knowing that her grandfather existed just 45 minutes away in a crumbling apartment complex in Millfield. "I think there's been some confusion," I managed, gripping the phone tighter. "Victoria and her husband, they have money, significant money. Why would you be calling me?" "Mr. Sullivan, according to our records, you're listed as the financial guarantor for Emma's education. Your signature is on all the enrollment documents. Any unpaid balances ultimately become your responsibility." The words hit me like a physical blow. Financial guarantor, my signature. I sank into the kitchen chair, memories flooding back like water through a broken dam. 3 years ago, when Victoria had first enrolled Emma at Cromwell Academy, she'd sent me a stack of documents through her lawyer. No personal note, no explanation, just legal papers requiring my signature as co-guarantor for Emma's education. I'd signed them without hesitation. Despite everything that had happened between us, despite the 7 years of silence, despite the cruel words that had driven a stake through my heart, she was still my daughter. Emma was still my granddaughter. I'd thought it was Victoria's way of including me in their lives, even if only on paper. Now I understood it was simply a financial safety net. Insurance against the kind of catastrophic failure that apparently even successful investment bankers could experience. "Mrs. Reeves, I need to understand something. Why hasn't Victoria paid this tuition herself? What's happened?" A long pause. When she spoke again, her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering bad news professionally. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm not privy to the family's personal financial details. However, I can tell you that Mr. Ashworth's assets appear to be frozen pending some kind of federal investigation. The payments stopped coming 3 months ago. Federal investigation. The words sent ice through my veins. Trevor Ashworth, the golden boy who'd swept my daughter off her feet with his Harvard MBA and his family's old money connections, was apparently in the kind of trouble that made headlines in financial newspapers. After hanging up with Mrs. Reeves, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the rain and trying to process this sudden shift in reality. $47,000. I made $31,000 a year as a night custodian at Riverside General Hospital, barely enough to cover my basic expenses even before the cancer treatments had started eating into my savings. Cancer. The word still felt foreign in my mouth, even 6 months after the diagnosis. Prostate cancer, caught early enough to be treatable, but late enough to be expensive. The insurance covered some of it, but the co-pays and deductibles had drained what little savings I'd managed to accumulate over the years. I walked to the bathroom mirror and studied the face looking back at me. 52 years old, but the stress and treatment had aged me beyond my years. Gray stubble covered hollow cheeks, and my eyes carried the weariness of a man who'd been fighting uphill battles for most of his adult life. This was the face my daughter was ashamed of. This was the man she'd written off as pathetic and worthless. But he was also the man whose signature could save her daughter's education. The irony wasn't lost on me as I pulled out the photo album I kept hidden in my bedroom closet. Victoria at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. Victoria at 12, intense and focused as I helped her build a science project about renewable energy that won first place at the regional competition. Victoria at 16, beautiful in her prom dress, dancing with me in our living room before her date arrived because she wanted to practice. Those had been good years, back when it was just the two of us after Margaret left. My wife had walked out when Victoria was 14, tired of what she called my lack of ambition and my blue-collar mentality. She'd wanted me to go back to school, get an MBA, climb the corporate ladder like her brother had done. But I'd been content with my job as a maintenance supervisor at the pharmaceutical plant, content with our modest suburban home, content with coaching Victoria's soccer team and helping her with homework at the kitchen table. Margaret saw stagnation where I saw stability. She saw limitation where I saw contentment. The divorce had been brutal, but Victoria had chosen to stay with me, claiming she understood why I'd rather be a hands-on father than a distant corporate climber. For 4 years, it had been just us against the world. I'd worked double shifts to pay for her college applications, her SAT prep courses, her spring break trips with friends. I'd driven her to college interviews across 3 states, sitting in parking lots for hours while she impressed admissions committees with her intelligence and determination. She'd gotten into Northwestern University on a partial academic scholarship. The rest we'd covered with student loans that I'd co-signed, promising to help pay back once she graduated. She'd studied business and economics, graduating magna cum laude with dreams of working in corporate finance. The transformation had been gradual but relentless. Each semester, she'd come home slightly different. Her clothes got more expensive, her vocabulary more sophisticated, her friends more connected. She'd started correcting my grammar and rolling her eyes when I'd talk about my work at the plant. By her senior year, she'd been embarrassed to have me visit campus. "Dad, you don't understand how things work here," she'd explained during one painful phone conversation.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Image matters. Connections matter. Your maintenance uniform doesn't exactly scream success to my professors and classmates. I'd swallowed my hurt and focused on being proud of her accomplishments. She'd landed an internship at a prestigious Chicago firm, then a full-time position after graduation. She'd moved into a downtown apartment that cost more per month than I made in 2 months, funded by her signing bonus and a generous salary that dwarfed my annual income. The final break had come during her 2nd year at the firm. She'd brought Trevor home for Thanksgiving. This polished young man, with his designer suits and his casual references to family vacation homes in the Hamptons. They'd sat at my kitchen table, eating the turkey I'd spent all day preparing, while Trevor had peppered me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than conversation. "So, Marcus, Victoria tells me you work in maintenance. Have you ever considered pursuing additional education? There are excellent executive programs for working professionals." "Trevor means well, Dad," Victoria had said quickly, but I'd caught the embarrassment in her voice. "He just believes in maximizing human potential." That's when I'd made my mistake. Instead of nodding politely and changing the subject, I'd tried to defend my choices. I like my work. I take pride in keeping the plant running smoothly. I've been there 18 years, and I feel like I'm contributing something valuable. Trevor had smiled, the kind of smile wealthy people use when confronted with concepts they find quaint but misguided. Of course, every job has dignity. But don't you want more for yourself? More for Victoria's future? "I want Victoria to be happy," I'd replied. "And I want her to remember that success isn't just about money or status. It's about character, integrity, treating people with respect regardless of their position in life." The conversation had continued to deteriorate from there. Trevor had made subtle comments about generational poverty and limiting beliefs, while Victoria had grown increasingly uncomfortable. By the end of the evening, she'd been looking at me like I was an embarrassing relic from a past she wanted to forget. The explosion had come the next morning. Victoria had cornered me in the kitchen while Trevor was showering, her face flushed with an anger I'd never seen before. "How could you embarrass me like that? Trevor's family has connections everywhere. His father sits on boards with Fortune 500 CEOs. This relationship could open doors for me that I never dreamed possible, and you sit there defending your maintenance job like it's some noble calling." "Victoria, I was just being honest about who I am and what I value." "Well, maybe who you are isn't good enough anymore." The words had exploded out of her like a dam bursting. "Maybe your small-town values and your blue-collar pride are exactly what's holding our family back. Trevor sees potential in me, potential to be part of something bigger than this." She gestured around our kitchen with disgust, this room where we'd shared thousands of meals and conversations, where I'd helped her with homework and listened to her dreams and fears. "I'm ashamed of you, Dad. Ashamed of your pathetic job, your pathetic life, your pathetic dreams. Mom was right to leave you. I'm right to leave you too." Those words hit me like physical blows, each one precise and devastating. I'd stood there in my own kitchen, in the home I'd worked so hard to maintain and fill with love, while my daughter dismantled everything I thought we'd built together. "Victoria, you don't mean that. You're upset, but we can work through this." "No, Dad, we can't, because you'll never understand that some of us want more than just getting by. Some of us have ambitions that go beyond maintaining other people's equipment and coaching Little League teams." Trevor had appeared in the doorway then, freshly showered and dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Everything all right here?" "Everything's fine," Victoria had said, her voice suddenly cold and controlled. "Dad was just saying how proud he is of our engagement." I'd stared at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, announcing an engagement I was hearing about for the first time. "Engagement? Trevor proposed last night. We're planning a spring wedding in Chicago. Small ceremony, just immediate family and close friends." The message was clear. I wouldn't be invited. I wasn't immediate family anymore. I was an embarrassment to be managed and eventually discarded. They'd left that afternoon, Victoria hugging me briefly at the door, with the kind of perfunctory affection reserved for distant relatives at funerals. "Take care of yourself, Dad. Try to think about what we discussed." That had been 7 years ago. 7 years of silence, broken only by the legal documents I'd signed as financial guarantor for Emma's education. 7 years of wondering if I'd failed as a father, if I'd somehow stunted my daughter's potential through my own limitations. 7 years of working night shifts at the hospital, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while thinking about the granddaughter I'd never met and the daughter who'd written me off as worthless. Now, sitting in my kitchen with a foreclosure notice and a phone call about unpaid tuition, I realized that everything was about to change. Victoria needed something from me, something that all her husband's connections and all her corporate success couldn't provide. She needed my signature. The next morning brought a call from a law firm in Chicago. The voice was crisp, professional, and entirely impersonal. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Jennifer Walsh from Blackstone Meyer and Associates. I represent Victoria Ashworth, formerly Victoria Sullivan. We need to schedule a meeting regarding your financial obligations under the Cromwell Academy Guarantee Agreement." Financial obligations. Not daughter, not family emergency, not personal crisis. Just financial obligations. "When would be convenient for you to come to Chicago?" Ms. Walsh continued. "I can't afford to travel to Chicago," I said simply. "If Victoria wants to meet, she can come here." A pause. Clearly, this wasn't the response they'd expected. "Mr. Sullivan, this is a time-sensitive matter involving significant financial exposure. Surely you understand the urgency." "I understand that my daughter hasn't spoken to me in 7 years. If she wants my help now, she can make the effort to come see me." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll need to discuss this with my client and get back to you." The call came 3 hours later. Victoria herself this time, her voice tight with barely controlled desperation. "Dad, we need to talk. I'm driving down this afternoon." "All right." "That's it? Just all right?" "What else do you want me to say, Victoria? That I'm excited to see you after 7 years of silence? That I'm thrilled to discover you only contact me when you need something? Dad, please."
This is about Emma. This is about my daughter's future. Emma is my granddaughter too, Victoria. Something you've made sure I could never forget. Silence stretched between us, filled with 7 years of hurt and anger and disappointment. "I'll be there at 4, she said finally. I spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment with the kind of nervous energy that comes from anticipating a confrontation years in the making. I scrubbed the bathroom, vacuumed the living room, and organized the kitchen until everything was as presentable as possible. Not because I was trying to impress Victoria, but because I needed something to do with my hands while my mind raced through possible scenarios. At exactly 4 o'clock, a silver BMW pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex. I watched from my window as Victoria sat in the car for several minutes, apparently gathering courage or perhaps working up disgust for the surroundings she was about to enter. When she finally emerged, I barely recognized her. The confident young woman who'd left 7 years ago had been replaced by someone who looked older, more brittle, like expensive china that had developed hairline cracks. Her clothes were still designer quality, but there was something desperate in the way she held herself, a tension that suggested she was barely holding everything together. She knocked on my door with the kind of sharp, impatient rhythm that said she wanted this over with as quickly as possible. "Hello, Victoria." "Dad." We stood there for a moment, two strangers connected by blood and separated by everything else. She looked past me into the apartment, and I saw her take in the modest furnishings, the worn carpet, the careful economy of a man living on the edge of financial survival. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, and she entered my living room like she was touring a crime scene. She perched on the edge of my couch, her posture suggesting she might flee at any moment. "You look tired," I said, settling into my recliner. "I've been under a lot of stress lately." Her voice carried the brittle quality of someone trying very hard to maintain control. "I suppose you've heard about Trevor's situation. Mrs. Reeves mentioned there was a federal investigation. That's about all I know." Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "Trevor's been indicted for securities fraud, insider trading, market manipulation, conspiracy charges. His assets are frozen, his accounts are under federal supervision, and his legal bills are eating through what liquid cash we have left." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for months and couldn't contain them anymore. "I'm sorry to hear that." She looked at me sharply, searching for sarcasm or judgment, but I meant it sincerely. Whatever else had happened between us, I didn't take pleasure in her pain. "The thing is, Dad, they're going after everything. The penthouse, the cars, the investment accounts, even my jewelry. They're claiming that everything we bought was purchased with proceeds from illegal activities. What about your own income, your job?" "I lost my position when Trevor was arrested. Conflict of interest, they said. Bad optics for the firm." Her voice cracked slightly. "I haven't been able to find anything else. Apparently, being married to an accused felon makes you unemployable in financial services." I could see where this was leading, but I waited for her to continue. "Emma's tuition at Cromwell is $47,000. The house payments, the legal fees, basic living expenses, it's all more than I can manage right now. But if Emma loses her spot at Cromwell, if she has to transfer to public school in the middle of the academic year, it would be devastating for her." "Yes." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "She's thriving there. She's brilliant, Dad. Brilliant like I was at her age, but with opportunities I never had. Advanced mathematics, science programs, language immersion. Cromwell is her pathway to the kind of future every parent wants for their child." "And you need me to pay the tuition?" "I need you to restructure the guarantee agreement, work out a payment plan with the school, use your signature to buy us time until I can get back on my feet." There it was. After 7 years of silence, after calling me pathetic and worthless, after cutting me out of her life so completely that I'd never even met my granddaughter, Victoria needed the one thing that all her husband's connections and all her corporate success couldn't provide. She needed my help. "Victoria, I make $31,000 a year as a night custodian. I'm facing foreclosure on this apartment. I'm dealing with medical bills from cancer treatment that I can barely afford. Even if I wanted to help, I don't have $47,000. But you could co-sign a new loan, use your credit, your employment history. The school would work with us if they knew there was a stable guarantor backing the payments." "My credit that's already maxed out from medical expenses? My employment history as a maintenance worker that you were so ashamed of?" Victoria flinched at the reminder, but pressed forward. "Dad, please. I know I said horrible things 7 years ago. I know I hurt you. But this isn't about us. This is about Emma. Emma, who I've never met because you were too embarrassed to let your daughter know her grandfather existed. I was protecting her. From what? From knowing that she had family who loved her? From disappointment, from limitations, from settling for less than she deserved." The words hung in the air between us, each one a fresh wound layered over old scars. "So I'm a disappointment and a limitation? But now you want me to risk the little financial security I have left to save your daughter's private school education?" Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed forward, burying her head in her hands. "I don't know what else to do," she sobbed. "Everything's falling apart. Trevor might go to prison. I can't find work. We're going to lose everything. And Emma, she keeps asking why we can't afford things anymore, why Daddy doesn't come home for dinner, why I cry in the bathroom when I think she's not listening. For the first time in 7 years, I saw my daughter instead of the cold stranger she'd become. I saw the scared little girl who used to have nightmares and crawl into my bed, trusting that I could protect her from anything the world might throw at her. Victoria, look at me." She raised her head, her makeup smeared and her carefully styled hair disheveled. "If I help you with this, if I put my signature on new loan documents and risk what little financial stability I have left, I need something from you. Anything. I want to meet Emma. I want to be part of her life. I want to be her grandfather, not just a name on financial documents."
Victoria's face went through a complex series of emotions: relief, fear, calculation, and something that might have been shame. "Dad, Emma's used to a certain lifestyle, certain standards. She goes to country clubs, takes riding lessons, vacations in Europe. I don't know how to explain. How to explain that her grandfather is poor? How to explain that her grandfather is different from the world she knows? Maybe it's time she learned that there are different ways to live, different ways to measure success." Victoria was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. "If you meet Emma, if you become part of her life, you can't disappoint her the way you disappointed me." The accusation hit like a slap. "How did I disappoint you, Victoria? By working hard to support you? By being proud of honest work? By teaching you values that apparently weren't sophisticated enough for your new life? By being content with so little? By never wanting more, never pushing for better? By teaching me to settle instead of reach? I taught you to find satisfaction in meaningful work and genuine relationships. I taught you that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or their job title. And look where those lessons got me. Married to a criminal, unemployed, desperate enough to come crawling back to the father I haven't spoken to in 7 years. The words stung because they contained a twisted logic that I couldn't entirely refute. Victoria had rejected my values, pursued wealth and status instead, and ended up in a devastating situation that proved neither approach guaranteed security. Maybe, I said carefully, the problem wasn't your ambition. Maybe the problem was that you threw away everything solid in your life while chasing things that turned out to be illusions. Victoria looked at me with something that might have been surprise. You think I should have stayed here, worked at the plant, married someone local, been content with a small life? I think you should have taken your ambition and intelligence and built something that honored the values we shared, instead of abandoning those values entirely. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us processing 7 years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. Dad, if you help me with Emma's tuition, if you let me bring her to meet you, will you promise not to undermine the choices I've made for her education and upbringing? I'll promise to be honest with her about who I am and what I believe. I won't lie about my life or pretend to be something I'm not to fit into your world. That's what I'm afraid of. Victoria, what exactly are you afraid I'll do? Corrupt her with my blue-collar work ethic? Teach her that happiness doesn't require a trust fund? I'm afraid you'll make her dissatisfied with the opportunities I've worked so hard to provide. Or maybe you're afraid she'll realize that love and security don't come from money or status. Maybe you're afraid she'll learn that the grandfather you've hidden from her actually has something valuable to offer. Victoria stood up abruptly, pacing to my window and staring out at the parking lot where her BMW sat like an alien spaceship among the aging sedans and pickup trucks. I need to think about this. Take all the time you need, but remember, the school deadline is Friday, and Emma's education isn't the only thing hanging in the balance here. She turned back to face me. What do you mean? I mean, this is your chance to decide what kind of person you want to be. What kind of mother you want to be, whether you're going to repeat the same mistakes that drove us apart 7 years ago. Victoria gathered her purse and moved toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the knob. Dad, I need you to understand something. The life I built, the choices I made, they weren't just about rejecting your values. They were about creating opportunities for myself and my family that I never would have had otherwise. And how did that work out? It worked out until it didn't, but that doesn't mean the goals were wrong, just that I chose the wrong person to help me achieve them. Maybe the goals themselves were flawed, Victoria. Maybe chasing wealth and status instead of character and relationships was always going to end badly. She opened the door, letting in the cool afternoon air. I'll call you tomorrow. After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time, thinking about the conversation and what it revealed about both of us. Victoria was still convinced that her father's values were small and limiting, but she was desperate enough to ask for help from the man she'd rejected. I was still hurt by her abandonment, but I was also seeing an opportunity to rebuild something that had been broken for too long. The phone rang at 8 o'clock that evening. Victoria's voice was steadier, more controlled. Dad, I've talked to Emma about you. I told her she has a grandfather she's never met and that we're going to visit you this weekend. How did she react? She's curious. She asked why she'd never met you before, and I told her that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes that hurt the people they love. That must have been difficult for you to admit. Everything about this situation is difficult, but you're right that Emma deserves to know her grandfather, and you're right that I can't ask for your help without offering something in return. This isn't a transaction, Victoria. This is about family. Maybe, but it's also about proving that we can trust each other again. The following Saturday, Victoria arrived with Emma in tow. My granddaughter was small for 8 years old, with Victoria's dark hair and intelligent eyes, but there was something different about her demeanor. Where Victoria had always been intense and driven, Emma seemed more thoughtful, more observant. She stood slightly behind her mother, studying me with the kind of careful attention that suggested she was forming important judgments about this new person in her life. "Emma, this is your grandfather Marcus." "Hello, Emma. I'm very glad to finally meet you." She stepped forward and extended her hand with startling formality. "It's nice to meet you too, grandfather." Victoria shot me a look that said this formality was how Emma had been taught to interact with adults. No spontaneous hugs, no childish chatter, just polite, controlled interaction. "Would you like to come inside? I've got some hot chocolate on the stove, and I thought maybe we could look at some photo albums." Emma's eyes lit up slightly at the mention of photo albums. "Photo albums of what? Pictures of your mom when she was your age? Pictures of our family from before you were born?" We settled in my living room, Emma perched carefully on the edge of the couch while Victoria hovered nervously nearby. I pulled out the albums I'd hidden away for 7 years, opening them to pages filled with images of Victoria's childhood. "This is your mom at her 8th grade science fair. She built a working model of a wind turbine and won first place in the county competition." Emma leaned forward, studying the photograph intently. "Mom, you look so different." In the picture, Victoria was grinning widely, her hair in pigtails, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans as she stood next to her project. No designer clothes, no polished sophistication, just pure joy at accomplishing something she was proud of. "I was younger then," Victoria said carefully. "You look happier," Emma observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. We spent the next 2 hours going through albums, Emma asking questions about each photograph, while Victoria grew increasingly uncomfortable with the glimpses into a simpler past. There were pictures of camping trips, little league games, school plays, birthday parties in our backyard. A childhood rich in experiences, but modest in material comforts. "Grandfather, why don't I have any pictures like this?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma was seeing the difference between her mother's childhood and her own, between genuine family moments and the carefully orchestrated perfection of her current life. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "All my pictures are from fancy places, hotels and restaurants and vacation houses. But these pictures look like more fun. They look like you're really playing together, not just posing." Victoria's face flushed with embarrassment and something that might have been regret. "Emma, you've had wonderful experiences. Remember our trip to Paris last summer? The art museums, the beautiful hotels?" "I remember being bored a lot, and you and Daddy were always on your phones talking about work." The innocent observation was devastating in its accuracy. Emma was describing a childhood rich in material advantages, but poor in genuine connection and spontaneous joy. "Emma," I said gently, "would you like to help me make dinner? I was thinking we could make spaghetti and meatballs." "Could we really cook together? Mom usually orders food or has Mrs. Patterson make dinner." "We can absolutely cook together. In fact, your mom used to help me make dinner every night when she was your age." Emma looked at Victoria with surprise. "You cooked?" "I helped make simple things," Victoria said defensively. "Your mom was an excellent cook," I corrected. "She made the best pancakes in the county by the time she was 10 years old." We moved to the kitchen, where Emma threw herself into the cooking process with enthusiasm I hadn't expected. She measured ingredients carefully, stirred sauce with intense concentration, and peppered me with questions about everything we were doing. "Grandfather, why do you live in this apartment instead of a big house?" "This apartment is the right size for me. It's comfortable, affordable, and close to my work." "What kind of work do you do?" I caught Victoria's sharp look, a warning not to embarrass her with details about my humble employment. "I work at the hospital," I said simply. "I help keep the building clean and safe for patients and doctors." "Like a janitor?" "Yes, like a janitor." Emma considered this information with the same serious attention she'd given the cooking instructions. "That seems like important work. If the hospital isn't clean, people could get sicker. That's exactly right. Every job has dignity if it helps other people. Victoria moved to the stove, ostensibly to check the sauce, but really to avoid the conversation about the value of working-class employment. During dinner, Emma continued her careful observation of this new environment. She ate the spaghetti with genuine enjoyment, commented on how good everything tasted, and asked if she could help wash dishes afterward. At home, Mrs. Patterson does all the cleaning, she explained. Mom says it's not appropriate for children to do household chores. Well, in this house, everyone helps with the work. It teaches responsibility and makes everyone feel like part of the team. Emma nodded seriously, as if filing away this information for future reference. As the evening wound down, Emma curled up next to me on the couch while Victoria made phone calls related to Trevor's legal situation. We looked at more photo albums, and I told stories about her mother's childhood adventures. "Grandfather, why didn't I know about you before today?" The question was direct and impossible to avoid. I glanced at Victoria, who was pretending not to listen while talking quietly into her phone. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that make it hard for them to stay close to each other. Your mom and I had one of those disagreements. About what? About what's most important in life. About what it means to be successful and happy. Emma thought about this seriously. What do you think is most important? I think the most important things are loving your family, doing work that helps other people, being honest and kind, and finding joy in simple pleasures. What does Mom think is most important? I looked over at Victoria, still on her phone but clearly listening to our conversation. Your mom values achievement, education, opportunities, and financial security. Those are important things too. Can't you have both? That's a very wise question, Emma. I think you can have both, but sometimes people have to choose which ones come first. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged me with surprising warmth. "Can I come back next week?" "I'd love that, if it's okay with your mom." Victoria gathered her purse and coat, her expression unreadable. "We'll see. I need to work out the situation with the school first." After they left, I sat in my apartment thinking about the evening and what it had revealed. Emma was hungry for the kind of authentic family connection that Victoria's pursuit of status had failed to provide. She was drawn to simplicity, to hands-on experiences, to the values I'd tried to instill in her mother years earlier. But more importantly, I'd seen something in Victoria's eyes as she watched her daughter engage with this different way of living. Something that might have been recognition or regret, or perhaps just the beginning of understanding that her rejection of her father's values had cost her more than she'd realized. The phone call came on Wednesday. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation, about Emma's reaction to meeting you, about everything that's happened. And I want to make a deal with you. You help me restructure Emma's tuition payments, and I'll bring her to visit you every weekend. But there have to be ground rules." I leaned back in my kitchen chair, staring at the foreclosure notice still taped to my refrigerator. "What kind of ground rules?" "You can't undermine my parenting decisions. You can't fill her head with ideas about how my lifestyle choices are wrong. And you absolutely cannot discuss Trevor's legal troubles with her." "Victoria, I'm not interested in undermining anyone. I just want to know my granddaughter." "I mean it, Dad. Emma is at a delicate age. She's dealing with enough confusion right now without having her grandfather tell her that money doesn't matter and that her private school education is somehow corrupting her." The accusation stung because it revealed how little Victoria understood about my actual values. When did I ever say money doesn't matter? When did I ever criticize education? You criticized my choices. You made it clear that you thought I was shallow and materialistic for wanting better things. I criticized your willingness to throw away family relationships in pursuit of those things.
There's a difference. A long pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was tired, defeated. "Dad, I can't afford to lose Emma's respect on top of everything else. If she starts to see me as some kind of villain because I gave her advantages you never had, I don't think I could handle that." For the first time, I heard real vulnerability in my daughter's voice. Behind all the anger and defensiveness was a mother terrified that her child was slipping away from her, just like she had slipped away from me. Victoria, I'm not trying to steal Emma's affection or turn her against you. I'm trying to be a grandfather. That means supporting you as her mother, not competing with you. Promise me. I promise to respect your role as her mother, but I also promise to be honest with Emma about who I am and what I believe. If those two things conflict, we'll figure it out together. Another pause. The tuition situation is urgent. I need to know if you're willing to co-sign a new loan agreement. I looked around my small apartment, at the modest furnishings I'd accumulated over years of careful budgeting. $47,000 represented more money than I'd ever had at one time. It was a sum that could destroy what little financial security I'd managed to build. But it was also my granddaughter's future. I'll co-sign, I said quietly. But if I'm taking this risk, I want something more than weekend visits. What do you mean? I want Emma to spend part of her summer with me, a week, maybe two. I want her to see what it's like to live simply, to contribute to household work, to understand that there are different ways to be happy. Dad, Emma's summers are already planned. She has camps, lessons, enrichment programs. Her schedule is full. Then we'll work around the schedule. But Victoria, if I'm going to be financially responsible for Emma's education, I want to actually be part of educating her. Victoria was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. 1 week, she said finally. 1 week this summer. But if you fill her head with anti-materialistic propaganda, if you make her dissatisfied with her life, the deal is off. Deal. The next morning, I took the bus to Chicago to meet with Victoria's attorney and sign the new loan documents. The law office was everything I'd expected, all marble and mahogany and intimidating legal authority. Jennifer Walsh treated me with the kind of professional courtesy reserved for necessary but unimportant people. Mr. Sullivan, you understand that by signing these documents, you're personally guaranteeing Emma Ashworth's tuition payments for the remainder of her time at Cromwell Academy. Should Mrs. Ashworth default on these payments, you become fully responsible for the debt. I understand. This is a significant financial obligation. According to the payment schedule, you would be liable for up to $200,000 over the next 10 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000, more than 6 years of my current salary, enough to buy several modest homes in neighborhoods like mine. I understand the risk. Miss Walsh slid the documents across the polished conference table. Each page represented a level of financial exposure that could destroy me if things went wrong. But each page also represented my granddaughter's future and my chance to rebuild a relationship with my daughter. I signed my name carefully on each designated line, watching my signature commit me to a level of debt that terrified me. These documents will be filed with Cromwell Academy today, Miss Walsh said as I finished. Emma's enrollment will be secure for the remainder of the academic year. As I left the law office, I felt a mixture of relief and terror. I'd just bet my entire financial future on the hope that Victoria would honor our agreement and that I'd somehow be able to manage the payments if everything went wrong. The bus ride back to Millfield gave me 2 hours to think about what I'd just committed to. $200,000. The number kept cycling through my mind like a broken record. If Victoria's financial situation didn't improve, if Trevor went to prison and their assets remained frozen, I'd be facing payments that would consume every penny I earned for the rest of my working life. But as terrifying as the financial risk was, the emotional opportunity felt even more significant. For the first time in 7 years, I had a chance to be part of my family again. Emma was curious about me, drawn to the simplicity and authenticity she'd experienced during our first meeting. Victoria was desperate enough to actually listen to me instead of just dismissing my values as small-town naivety.
Maybe this crisis would force us to rebuild something that should never have been broken in the first place. The first weekend visit went better than I dared to hope. Victoria dropped Emma off on Saturday morning with a list of instructions that covered everything from dietary restrictions to bedtime routines to acceptable television programming. Emma listened to these instructions with the patient expression of a child accustomed to micromanagement. "Can we cook again, grandfather?" she asked as soon as Victoria's BMW disappeared around the corner. "What would you like to make?" "Something we can eat with our hands, something messy." I laughed at the request, recognizing a child's desire for experiences that her carefully controlled life didn't usually allow. "How about pizza? We can make the dough from scratch." Emma's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Really? We can make pizza dough?" "We can make everything from scratch. Dough, sauce, even grate our own cheese." For the next 3 hours, my kitchen became a battlefield of flour and tomato sauce. Emma threw herself into the process with enthusiasm that was both delightful and revealing. This was a child who was hungry for hands-on experiences, for the satisfaction of creating something with her own effort. "Grandfather, why does Mom never cook like this?" "Your mom is very busy with grown-up responsibilities. Cooking from scratch takes time she doesn't always have. But this is more fun than ordering food." Different people find happiness in different activities. Your mom finds satisfaction in her work and in providing you with opportunities. Emma considered this while kneading pizza dough with intense concentration. What kind of opportunities? Your school, your music lessons, your riding classes. These are chances to learn and grow in ways that not every child gets to experience. Do you think those things are important? The question was direct and impossible to deflect. Emma was asking me to define value, to explain what mattered and why. I think learning is always important. Music and writing and advanced mathematics can enrich your life in wonderful ways. But I also think there's value in simpler skills. Knowing how to cook, how to fix things when they break, how to find joy in everyday experiences. Can't I learn both kinds of things? Of course you can. The question is whether you'll have time and opportunity for both. As we shaped our pizza and slid it into the oven, Emma continued her thoughtful questioning.
Grandfather, why don't you have a big house like we do? I don't need a big house. This apartment has everything I require to be comfortable and happy. But wouldn't a bigger house be better? Bigger houses cost more money, require more time to maintain, and often end up being filled with things we don't really need. Sometimes having less stuff means having more freedom. Emma absorbed this information with the same serious attention she'd given our cooking project. Mom says that successful people live in nice houses and drive nice cars. Your mom is right that successful people often have those things, but success can be measured in different ways. Some people measure it by how much money they make or what kind of house they live in. Other people measure it by how happy they are, how much they help other people, or how close they are to their family. Which way is right? Both ways can be right. The important thing is choosing what matters most to you and living according to those values. That evening, as we ate our homemade pizza and watched an old movie together, Emma curled up next to me on the couch with the kind of unself-conscious affection that suggested she was genuinely comfortable in my presence. "Grandfather, I like being here. I like having you here. It's different from home, quieter, more relaxed." "How so?" "At home, there's always something we have to do or somewhere we have to go. Mom's always checking her phone or talking to lawyers about Daddy's problems. Here, we can just be together." The observation was devastating in its simplicity. Emma was describing a childhood so overscheduled and anxiety-ridden that a quiet evening making pizza felt like a luxury. "Emma, do you ever talk to your mom about feeling rushed or stressed?" "I tried once, but she said that keeping busy is how successful people live. She said that if I want to achieve great things, I need to learn how to manage a full schedule." "And how do you feel about that?" Emma was quiet for a long time, thinking carefully about her answer. "Sometimes I wish we could just stay home and do nothing. Sometimes I wish Mom wasn't always worried about money and lawyers and Daddy's troubles.
Have you told her that? She's too busy to talk about feelings. She says that dwelling on emotions is unproductive. I felt a surge of anger at Victoria for imposing such an adult burden on an 8-year-old child. Emma was being taught that emotional needs were weaknesses to be managed rather than legitimate human experiences to be acknowledged and addressed. Emma, emotions aren't unproductive. They're how we understand what we need and want. Being able to talk about feelings is one of the most important skills anyone can learn. Really? Really? If you're sad or worried or confused about something, those feelings are telling you something important about your experience. What should I do when I have big feelings? You should find someone you trust and talk about them. Maybe your mom when she's not busy with lawyers. Maybe a teacher at school. Maybe me when you're visiting. Emma nodded seriously, filing away this permission to have and express emotions. When Victoria arrived to pick up Emma Sunday evening, she found us sitting at my kitchen table working on a jigsaw puzzle. Emma was chattering about our weekend activities with enthusiasm that was impossible to miss. We made pizza from scratch, Mom, and we watched a movie about a dog who saves a family from a fire. And Grandfather taught me how to play checkers. Victoria smiled, but I caught the tension around her eyes. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Did you remember to practice your violin? Emma's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. We didn't have time for violin. Emma, your recital is next month. We can't afford to skip practice sessions. But I had fun learning other things. Fun is important, but discipline is more important. You can't achieve excellence with consistent practice. I watched this exchange with growing understanding of the pressure Emma lived under. Every moment of her life was supposed to serve some larger goal of achievement and advancement. Simple enjoyment for its own sake was seen as time wasted. Victoria, maybe we could work out a schedule that includes both structured practice and unstructured playtime. Dad, Emma's education is carefully planned to maximize her potential. Random activities might be fun, but they don't contribute to her long-term development. Learning to cook, to solve puzzles, to have conversations about emotions, these aren't random activities. They're life skills that will serve her well regardless of her career path. Victoria's jaw tightened with familiar irritation. Emma doesn't need to learn how to cook. She'll have resources to hire people for domestic tasks. What she needs is advanced academic preparation and cultural sophistication. What if she wants to cook? What if she finds joy in creating something with her own hands? Then she can take a cooking class at Le Cordon Bleu when she's older. Right now, her time is better spent on activities that will help her get into an Ivy League university. Emma listened to this conversation with the careful attention of a child who understood that important decisions about her life were being made. I saw her glance between her mother and me, processing the different philosophies being presented. Mom, could I learn cooking and still practice violin? Sweetheart, there are only so many hours in a day. We have to prioritize the activities that will benefit your future the most. But what if cooking makes me happy? Victoria's expression softened slightly at her daughter's plaintive question. Emma, happiness is important, but so is preparation for adult responsibilities. When you're older, you'll understand why structure and discipline matter more than immediate gratification. After they left, I sat in my apartment thinking about the conversation and what it revealed about Victoria's parenting philosophy. She was so focused on optimizing Emma's future that she was missing her daughter's present needs for simple joy and emotional connection. Emma was being raised like an investment portfolio, with every activity carefully calculated to produce maximum returns in terms of achievement and status. But what about her emotional development? What about her sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to performance and accomplishment? The following week brought a phone call that changed everything. Mr. Sullivan, this is Detective Raymond Hughes with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need to speak with you about your son-in-law, Trevor Ashworth. My blood ran cold. What about him? Mr. Ashworth is cooperating with our investigation into securities fraud at his former firm. However, we've discovered some irregularities in financial documents that bear your signature. What kind of irregularities? Educational loan guarantees that appear to have been used as collateral for other investments. We need to verify that you understood the full scope of what you were signing when you guaranteed Emma Ashworth's tuition payments. The implication hit me like a sledgehammer. Trevor had somehow used Emma's education loans as leverage for his illegal trading activities. My signature wasn't just guaranteeing tuition payments, it was entangled in federal crimes I knew nothing about. Detective Hughes, I signed those documents to help with my granddaughter's school tuition. I had no knowledge of any other use for those loans. We believe you, Mr. Sullivan. However, you may be called to testify about your understanding of the loan terms and your relationship with the Ashworth family. Am I in legal trouble? Not at this time, but I'd recommend consulting with an attorney to understand your rights and obligations as this investigation proceeds. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the loan documents I'd signed just weeks earlier. Every page I'd carefully reviewed, every signature I'd provided in good faith, was now potentially evidence in a federal criminal case. I thought I was helping my granddaughter and rebuilding my relationship with my daughter. Instead, I'd walked into a legal nightmare that could destroy what little financial security I had left. The call to Victoria went straight to voicemail. When she finally called back 3 hours later, her voice was tight with panic. "Dad, what did the FBI tell you?" "They told me that Trevor used Emma's education loans for his trading schemes. They told me I might have to testify in his criminal trial." "You can't testify against Trevor. It would destroy any chance he has of avoiding prison time." "Victoria, I'm not testifying against anyone. I'm testifying about what I knew when I signed those documents, which was nothing beyond helping with tuition payments." "But if you admit you had no knowledge of the investment implications, it makes Trevor look like he was deliberately deceiving people." "Maybe because he was deliberately deceiving people." "Dad, please. Trevor made mistakes, but he's not a criminal. He's just a person who got caught up in a system that rewards aggressive risk-taking." "Victoria, listen to yourself. Your husband used your daughter's education as collateral for illegal investments. He put my financial future at risk without my knowledge or consent. How is that not criminal behavior?" "It's complicated. You don't understand how financial markets work. I understand that honest people don't lie about what documents mean when they ask others to sign them." Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable. "Dad, if Trevor goes to prison, if his assets remain frozen, Emma and I will have nothing. No home, no income, no resources. The tuition payments you guaranteed will become your full responsibility. I understand that. $200,000, Dad, on your salary, that's impossible. Then maybe it's time to consider other options for Emma's education." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe Emma doesn't need to attend the most expensive private school in Chicago. Maybe she could get an excellent education at a good public school or a less expensive private school." "Absolutely not. Emma's future depends on the connections and opportunities that Cromwell provides. I won't have her educational prospects destroyed because Trevor made poor decisions. Victoria, Emma's future depends on developing character, intelligence, and resilience. Those qualities can be developed anywhere if she has supportive adults who believe in her. You don't understand what it takes to succeed in today's world. Without the right credentials, the right connections, the right preparation, Emma will be locked out of opportunities before she even has a chance to pursue them. Or maybe with the right values and the right support, she'll create her own opportunities regardless of where she goes to school." Our conversation ended without resolution, but with a clearer understanding of the fundamental disagreement that had driven us apart 7 years earlier. Victoria believed that external circumstances largely determined a person's prospects for success. I believed that internal qualities mattered more than external advantages. Now Emma was caught in the middle of that disagreement, and the stakes were higher than ever. The weekend visits continued despite the legal complications. Emma seemed oblivious to the adult drama swirling around her, focused instead on the simple pleasures of our time together. We cooked elaborate meals, worked on puzzles, took walks around my neighborhood, and had long conversations about everything from school to friendship to her dreams for the future. Grandfather, what did you want to be when you were my age? I wanted to be a firefighter. I thought that saving people from burning buildings was the most heroic thing anyone could do. Why didn't you become a firefighter? I discovered that there are lots of ways to help people, and not all of them require running into burning buildings. I found satisfaction in maintaining equipment that keeps people safe and healthy. Do you ever wish you had done something different? Sometimes, but mostly I'm proud of the work I've done and the life I've built. Emma absorbed this with her usual thoughtfulness. Mom says that people who don't achieve great things spend their lives regretting missed opportunities. What do you think great achievements are? Getting into good schools, making lots of money, having important jobs, living in nice houses. Those can be great achievements, but what about raising children who are kind and honest? What about helping people who are sick or scared? What about creating art or music that makes the world more beautiful? Are those great achievements too? I think they are. I think any time you make the world a little better than you found it, you've achieved something great. Emma was quiet for a while, processing this different definition of success. Grandfather, do you think I'm achieving great things? I think you're learning to ask important questions, to think carefully about what matters, and to treat people with kindness. Those seem like great achievements to me. But what about my grades and my music lessons and my writing classes? Those are wonderful accomplishments too, but they're not the most important things about you. What are the most important things about me? Your curiosity, your thoughtfulness, your capacity for joy. The way you help with cooking even when it's messy. The way you listen carefully when people talk to you. The way you care about other people's feelings. Emma smiled with the kind of radiant happiness that comes from being seen and valued for who you are rather than what you achieve. I wish Mom could see those things too. Your mom loves you very much, Emma. Sometimes adults get so worried about preparing children for the future that they forget to appreciate who those children are right now. Could you tell her that? I could try. But the most important thing is for you to know that you're valuable and lovable exactly as you are. These conversations with Emma became the highlight of my weeks. Watching her process different ways of thinking about success and happiness gave me hope that she wouldn't repeat Victoria's mistakes. She was developing the capacity to question assumptions, to think independently, and to value relationships over achievements. But I also saw the stress she carried from living in two different worlds. At home, she was expected to be a high-achieving student focused on optimization and advancement. With me, she was allowed to be a curious child exploring simple pleasures and authentic relationships. The conflict between these two environments was taking its toll. Emma had started having nightmares about disappointing her mother, about not being smart enough or accomplished enough to justify the investments being made in her education. Grandfather, what happens if I don't get into a good college? You'll go to a different college, get a good education, and build a life that makes you happy.
But Mom says that if I don't get into an Ivy League school, I'll have wasted all the money spent on my education. Emma, education is never wasted. Learning to think, to question, to understand the world around you, these skills will serve you well regardless of which college you attend. But what if I disappoint everyone? Who is everyone? Mom and Trevor when he comes home, and my teachers, and everyone who expects me to be successful. Emma, the only person you need to avoid disappointing is yourself. If you work hard, treat people kindly, and pursue things that genuinely interest you, you'll never disappoint the people who truly matter. How do I know which people truly matter? The people who love you for who you are, not just for what you achieve. Emma nodded, but I could see that she was still processing the competing messages about her worth and potential. The legal situation continued to deteriorate. Trevor's trial was scheduled for the fall, and federal prosecutors were building a case that painted him as the ringleader of an elaborate scheme to defraud investors. The education loans I'd guaranteed were just one small piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. Victoria called me weekly with updates that grew increasingly desperate. Trevor's attorneys were proposing plea bargains that would still result in significant prison time. The frozen assets would likely be seized permanently to compensate defrauded investors.
The family's financial situation was spiraling toward complete collapse. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really consider it before you answer. What is it? If I agreed to move back to Millfield, if I enrolled Emma in the local public school system, would you help us get back on our feet? The question stunned me into silence. Victoria was proposing to abandon everything she'd worked to build, everything she'd valued above family relationships, and return to the simple life she'd rejected 7 years earlier. Victoria, what are you really asking? I'm asking if you'd let Emma and I move into your apartment temporarily while I figure out how to rebuild our lives. I'm asking if you'd help me find work in Millfield, even if it's not the kind of corporate position I'm used to. I'm asking if you'd give me a chance to prove that I can value family over status. What about Emma's education? What about the connections and opportunities you've insisted are essential for her future? Maybe I was wrong about some of that. Maybe Emma would be better off in a stable environment with people who love her than in an expensive school funded by criminal proceeds. Victoria, this is a huge decision. Are you sure you're thinking clearly? I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Trevor's situation isn't going to improve. His legal troubles are just beginning, and even if he avoids the worst consequences, our marriage is over. I can't stay with someone who risked our daughter's future for his own greed. You're talking about divorce? I'm talking about starting over, completely. Building a life based on different values, different priorities. And you think you can do that in Millfield? You think you can be happy living simply after years of luxury? I think I can learn. I think Emma and I both need to learn what really matters before we lose each other the way I lost you. Victoria's voice cracked with emotion, and for the first time in 7 years, I heard my daughter instead of the cold stranger she'd become. Dad, I made terrible mistakes. I threw away the most important relationship in my life because I thought financial success was more valuable than family love. I don't want Emma to make the same mistakes. What would you want to do for work? I don't know. Maybe I could teach business classes at the community college? Maybe I could work for a small company that values ethics over profit margins. Maybe I could start over in a field that actually helps people instead of just generating wealth. And Emma, how would she adjust to such a different life? Emma is resilient. She's also unhappy in our current situation, even though she tries to hide it. Maybe she needs the same thing I need, a chance to build relationships that aren't based on performance and achievement. I thought about this proposition for a long time. My small apartment was barely adequate for one person, let alone 3. My income could not support 2 additional people, especially with the looming obligation of Emma's tuition payments. Logistically, Victoria's proposal seemed impossible, but emotionally, it represented everything I'd hoped for during 7 years of separation. A chance to rebuild our family relationship. A chance to be part of Emma's daily life instead of just weekend visits. A chance to prove that love and support mattered more than money and status. Victoria, if you're serious about this, if you're really willing to start over and build a different kind of life, then yes, I'll help you however I can. Even though it means financial hardship for you, even though my mistakes have already cost you so much, especially because of that. Family members help each other through difficult times. That's what family means. Victoria was quiet for so long I thought she might have changed her mind. Dad, I want to bring Emma to see the public elementary school in Millfield. I want her to understand what we're considering before we make any final decisions. That sounds like a good idea. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on you. The following Saturday, Victoria and Emma made the drive to Millfield for an extended visit. Instead of the usual overnight stay, Victoria planned to spend several days exploring the community and helping Emma understand the potential changes ahead. Emma's reaction to the elementary school surprised both of us. Instead of being disappointed by the modest facilities and smaller class sizes, she seemed intrigued by the more relaxed atmosphere and the diversity of students from different economic backgrounds. Grandfather, the kids here seem friendlier than at Cromwell. What makes you think that? At Cromwell, everyone is trying to be the smartest or the most accomplished. Here, the kids just seem like they're trying to have fun and be friends. Victoria watched Emma interact with potential classmates during our school tour, and I saw something shifting in her expression. For the first time, she was seeing education from Emma's perspective rather than from her own anxieties about status and advancement. The academic programs aren't as advanced, Victoria observed to the principal. That's true, Principal Martinez acknowledged. But we focus on developing the whole child, not just academic achievement. We want our students to be curious, creative, collaborative, and confident. What about preparation for high school? What about college readiness? Our students go on to excel in high school and college because they've learned to think critically, work hard, and support each other. Those skills matter more than advanced placement credits. After the school visit, we walked through downtown Millfield while Emma explored local shops and chatted with storekeepers. Victoria seemed to be seeing the community through different eyes, noticing the sense of connection and mutual support that characterized small-town life. It's so different from Chicago, she observed. Different how? People actually talk to each other. The pace is slower. Emma seems more relaxed here than I've seen her in months. Small towns have their own advantages and disadvantages. The question is whether those advantages align with what you and Emma need right now. That evening, as we sat in my living room discussing the practical details of such a major move, Emma fell asleep on the couch between us. Victoria looked at her peaceful expression and spoke quietly. Dad, I think I've been so afraid of Emma missing opportunities that I forgot to let her be happy.
Happiness and opportunity aren't mutually exclusive, Victoria. But maybe I was pursuing the wrong kinds of opportunities. Maybe I was so focused on external advantages that I ignored internal development. What do you mean? I mean, Emma has had every material advantage, educational enrichment, every cultural exposure money can buy. But she's anxious, stressed, and disconnected from simple pleasures. What good are opportunities if they come at the cost of emotional well-being? I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully, her face free of the tension she carried during her structured Chicago life. Victoria, what do you want Emma to remember about her childhood? I want her to remember feeling loved, supported, and free to explore her interests without constant pressure to perform. And what does she remember about her current childhood? Victoria was quiet for a long time, studying her daughter's sleeping face. She remembers schedules, expectations, and adults who are always worried about something. She remembers feeling like she has to earn love through achievement. That's not what you intended. No, but it's what happened. I became so obsessed with giving her advantages that I forgot to give her security and unconditional love. It's not too late to change that, isn't it? She's 8 years old, and she's already internalized so much pressure to be perfect. Children are resilient, Victoria. If you start prioritizing her emotional needs alongside her educational development, she'll learn to balance achievement with happiness. Victoria gently stroked Emma's hair, and I saw tears in her eyes. Dad, I don't know how to live simply. I don't know how to find satisfaction in ordinary things. What if I try to change and just end up resenting the limitations? Then you'll figure it out as you go, the same way everyone else does. What if I can't find work that pays enough to contribute to household expenses? Then we'll live more simply than we might prefer, but we'll live together as a family. What if Emma struggles academically without the advanced programs she's used to? Then we'll help her find other ways to challenge herself intellectually. Victoria smiled through her tears. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, but manageable. Most problems have solutions if you're willing to be flexible about what those solutions look like. Dad, if we do this, if we really start over here, I want to do it right. I want to learn to value the things you tried to teach me before I was too proud to listen. What things? Honesty, kindness, contentment with enough rather than always wanting more. Relationships that matter more than achievements that impress other people. Those aren't lessons you learn once and then master forever, Victoria. They're daily choices about what to prioritize and how to treat people. Will you help me learn to make better choices?
I'll help however I can, but ultimately, you'll have to decide what kind of person you want to be and what kind of mother you want to be for Emma. I want to be the kind of mother who puts her daughter's well-being ahead of her own ego. I want to be the kind of person who measures success by relationships rather than bank balances. Then that's who you'll become, one choice at a time. Emma stirred in her sleep, and Victoria carefully gathered her daughter into her arms to carry her to the guest bedroom I'd prepared. "Dad, I think we're going to do this. I think we're going to move here and start over." "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified, but I'm also more sure about this than I've been about anything in years. Then we'll make it work. Somehow, we'll figure out how to make it work." As Victoria carried Emma to bed, I sat in my living room thinking about the dramatic changes ahead. My small apartment would become crowded with 3 people. My modest income would need to stretch further than ever before. The legal complications from Trevor's criminal case would continue to create stress and uncertainty. But for the first time in 7 years, my family would be together again. Emma would grow up knowing her grandfather, learning that love didn't depend on achievement and that happiness could be found in simple pleasures. Victoria would have a chance to rebuild her life based on values that prioritized relationships over status. It wouldn't be easy. There would be adjustments, conflicts, and moments of doubt about whether we'd made the right choice. But we'd face those challenges together, as a family, supporting each other through whatever difficulties lay ahead. The phone rang early Monday morning, interrupting my thoughts about practical preparations for Victoria and Emma's move. Detective Hughes's voice was businesslike but not unkind. "Mr. Sullivan, Trevor Ashworth has agreed to a plea bargain that will require him to testify against his co-conspirators. However, the prosecution still needs your testimony to establish the timeline of the education loan documents. When would I need to testify? Probably sometime in the next 6 months. The testimony would be straightforward, just confirming when you signed the documents and what you understood about their purpose. And after I testify, what happens to my financial obligations? That's a civil matter, separate from the criminal case. You'll need to work that out with the school, and possibly with bankruptcy attorneys if the Ashworth assets can't cover the obligations." After hanging up, I realized that the legal complications would follow us to Millfield regardless of where Victoria and Emma lived. The educational loan obligations, Trevor's criminal trial, the frozen assets, these issues would continue to create stress and uncertainty for months to come. But at least we'd face them together as a family. The move happened faster than any of us expected. Within 3 weeks, Victoria had packed their essential belongings, terminated their Chicago apartment lease, and enrolled Emma in Millfield Elementary School. Trevor, facing the reality of his plea bargain and probable prison sentence, had agreed to an uncontested divorce that left Victoria with nothing, but also freed her from any future liability for his crimes. My small apartment became a cramped but surprisingly functional home for 3 people. Victoria took the living room couch, Emma got the small guest alcove I'd converted into a bedroom, and I kept my own room. The arrangement required careful coordination of schedules and constant negotiation of space, but it also created the kind of daily intimacy that our family hadn't experienced in years. Emma adapted to her new school with remarkable resilience. The academic pace was slower than Cromwell Academy, but the social environment was warmer and more inclusive. She made friends quickly, discovered a love for art classes that Cromwell hadn't offered, and began participating in after-school activities that actually seemed to bring her joy rather than stress. "Grandfather, I like my new teacher," she announced during our first week together. "She says that making mistakes is how we learn, not something to be ashamed of. That's a wise teacher. At Cromwell, if you made mistakes, it meant you weren't working hard enough or weren't smart enough. Here, Mrs. Rodriguez says mistakes are just information about what to try differently next time." Victoria, listening from the kitchen where she was learning to cook simple meals, paused in her dinner preparations. "Emma, mistakes at Cromwell weren't shameful. They were just opportunities for improvement." "But Mom, you always got upset when I brought home papers with corrections on them. You'd say we needed to figure out what went wrong so it wouldn't happen again." I was trying to help you achieve your best. I know, but it felt like my best was never good enough. Victoria set down her wooden spoon and joined us in the living room, her face troubled by this revelation. Emma, I never wanted you to feel like your best wasn't good enough. But you always wanted me to do better, get higher grades, practice more, work harder. It seemed like you'd only be proud of me when I was perfect. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. Victoria began to understand how her anxiety about Emma's future had translated into constant pressure that undermined her daughter's confidence and joy in learning. Emma began to express feelings she'd been suppressing for years about the stress of trying to meet impossibly high expectations. I want to do well in school, Emma explained carefully, but I also want to have fun and not worry all the time about disappointing people. You never disappoint me by being yourself, I told her. You only disappoint me when you're too afraid to try new things because you might not be perfect at them. Victoria watched this exchange with visible emotion. Emma, I think I made some mistakes about what success means and how to help you achieve it. What kind of mistakes? I thought that pushing you to excel meant never being satisfied with your current level of achievement. But I think what it really means is encouraging you to grow while also appreciating who you are right now. So I don't have to be perfect? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be curious, kind, and willing to keep learning. Emma smiled with relief that was heartbreaking to witness. For 8 years, she'd been carrying the weight of adult expectations that no child should bear. Now she was beginning to understand that love and approval weren't contingent on performance and achievement. Victoria's adjustment to our new life was more complicated. After years of financial abundance and professional status, she struggled with the practical realities of limited resources and modest circumstances. The first time she had to shop at discount stores for Emma's school clothes, she came home in tears. I feel like I'm failing her, she confessed that evening as we sat in my small living room after Emma had gone to bed. At Cromwell, the other kids wore designer uniforms and carried expensive backpacks. Here, I'm buying her clothes from the clearance rack at Target. How does Emma feel about her new clothes? She says she likes them because they're more comfortable and she doesn't have to worry about keeping them pristine. Then maybe the person who's struggling with the change isn't Emma. Victoria was quiet for a long time, processing this observation. You're right, I'm the one who's embarrassed by shopping at discount stores. I'm the one who feels like cheaper clothes somehow diminish Emma's worth or prospects. What do you think those feelings are really about? Fear, I suppose. Fear that I'm condemning Emma to a smaller life than she deserves. Fear that other people will judge us for not having nice things. Fear that I've made terrible decisions that will limit Emma's opportunities. Victoria, what makes a life big or small? I used to think it was about resources, connections, achievements, the scope of possibilities available to you. And now? Now I'm not sure. Emma seems happier here than she ever was in Chicago. She's more relaxed, more curious, more willing to take risks and make mistakes. Maybe those qualities matter more than the size of her college fund. What makes you happy? Victoria considered the question seriously. Honestly, cooking dinner together every night, helping Emma with homework at the kitchen table, having time to actually talk with you instead of just coordinating logistics. These simple domestic routines that I used to think were beneath my ambitions. Those routines create the foundation for everything else that matters: security, connection, shared purpose, unconditional love. I think I forgot that relationships require time and attention, not just financial investment. The conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from her alcove bedroom. Mom, could you read me a story? Victoria's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. Emma hasn't asked me to read bedtime stories in over a year. She said she was too old for that. Maybe she's not too old. Maybe she just needed to feel safe enough to ask for what she wanted. Victoria spent the next hour reading to Emma. their voices carrying softly through the thin walls of our small apartment. It was a sound I hadn't heard since Emma was very young, this peaceful domestic intimacy between mother and daughter. Finding work in Millfield proved challenging for Victoria. Her corporate finance background was impressive, but not particularly relevant to the local job market. Most available positions paid a fraction of her previous salary and required skills she'd never developed. After 2 months of unsuccessful applications, she finally found part-time work as a bookkeeper for 3 small local businesses. The pay was modest, but the work was honest, and the employers appreciated her analytical skills and attention to detail. "It's strange," she told me after her first week. "I'm making less money in a month than I used to spend on dinners out, but I feel more useful than I did in my corporate job." How so? "These businesses actually need help with financial organization and planning. I can see how my work directly impacts their success and their employees' livelihoods. In Chicago, I was just moving money around to generate more money for people who already had more than they needed." Do you miss the corporate environment? I miss the intellectual challenge sometimes, but I don't miss the politics, the pressure, or the constant focus on profit maximization over human welfare. Victoria's growing satisfaction with her work was matched by improvements in her relationship with Emma. Without the stress of Trevor's legal troubles and financial pressures, Victoria had emotional space to actually pay attention to her daughter's daily experiences and needs. "Mom, will you help me with my science project?" asked one evening, a request that would have been scheduled and structured in their previous life. "Of course. What's your project about?" "I want to build a model of a water filtration system. Mrs. Rodriguez says we can choose any topic that interests us." Victoria and Emma spent the next several evenings researching water filtration, gathering materials, and constructing a working model that demonstrated how contaminated water could be cleaned through various physical and chemical processes. The project wasn't as sophisticated as what Emma might have produced at Cromwell Academy, but it was entirely her own work, driven by genuine curiosity rather than external pressure. "Mom, this is fun," Emma observed as they tested their filtration system with muddy water from our back patio. "I like figuring out how things work." "You've always been curious about how things work. Remember when you were 5 and you took apart our kitchen clock? You were so mad because it was an expensive clock." "I was mad because I thought you were being destructive. I should have been proud that you wanted to understand how the mechanism functioned." "Could we take apart something else and see how it works?" Victoria looked around our modest apartment, considering which items could be sacrificed for educational exploration. "How about that old radio in the closet? If we break it while taking it apart, we're not losing anything valuable." Watching Victoria encourage Emma's curiosity rather than directing it toward predetermined outcomes was a revelation. Emma flourished under this new approach, becoming more confident in her questions and more willing to experiment with ideas that might not lead to perfect results. The legal complications from Trevor's case continued to create periodic stress. I testified in his criminal trial, confirming the timeline of my signature on the education loan documents and my understanding of their purpose. Trevor was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, a consequence that brought both relief and sadness to Victoria. "I loved him once," she told me after the sentencing hearing. "Or I thought I did. Maybe I was just in love with the lifestyle he represented and the status his family connections provided. What's the difference? Real love means caring about someone's character, their values, their integrity. I was attracted to Trevor's surface qualities without paying attention to who he actually was underneath the polish." Have you learned something from that mistake? I've learned that impressive credentials and financial success don't guarantee moral character.
I've learned that compatibility requires shared values, not just shared ambitions. The education loan obligations remained a looming financial burden. Even with Victoria's part-time income contributing to household expenses, we couldn't realistically manage payments on a $200,000 debt over the next 10 years. Victoria and I met with a bankruptcy attorney to explore our options. "The good news is that your daughter's transfer to public school eliminates the ongoing tuition obligations," the attorney explained.
The bad news is that you're still liable for the existing debt unless the Ashworth estate can eventually pay it off. What are the chances of that? Slim. Most of Trevor's assets will go to compensating the victims of his investment fraud. Education loans will be low priority in the distribution. Victoria reached across the table and took my hand. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never intended for my mistakes to create this burden for you. We'll figure it out, I said simply. People survive financial setbacks all the time. But you could lose your apartment, your retirement savings, everything you've worked for. Victoria, I'd rather face financial difficulties with my family intact than live comfortably alone. The bankruptcy attorney outlined various scenarios, most of which involved significant financial hardship but not complete destitution. We would likely need to sell any assets of value, accept garnishment of my wages, and live very modestly for several years. But we could survive if we were careful and creative about managing expenses. The most important thing, the attorney emphasized, is that you're making these decisions together as a family unit. That changes everything about how you'll weather the difficulties ahead. After leaving the attorney's office, Victoria and I walked through downtown Millfield in contemplative silence. The financial realities were daunting, but they no longer felt insurmountable. We had each other, we had Emma's improved emotional health, and we had the daily satisfactions of a life built on relationships rather than achievements. Dad, do you regret signing those loan documents? I regret that Trevor used them for criminal purposes, but I don't regret trying to help with Emma's education. Even though it might cost you everything you've saved? Victoria, what good are savings if they can't be used to help the people you love? But your retirement, your security. My security comes from knowing that my family is together and that Emma is growing up with people who love her unconditionally. Money can't buy that kind of security. Victoria stopped walking and turned to face me. Dad, I need to tell you something I should have said 7 years ago. What's that? I'm proud of you. Proud of your work ethic, your integrity, your willingness to sacrifice for people you love. I was wrong to call those qualities pathetic or limiting. Thank you for saying that. I spent so many years thinking that success meant accumulating wealth and status. But watching you with Emma, seeing how she responds to your values and your way of approaching life, I realized that real success means raising children who are confident, kind, and capable of finding joy in simple things. Emma is turning out wonderfully. That's because of your love and support, not just mine. But she needed what you offered, what I had forgotten how to give. Unconditional acceptance, patience with mistakes, celebration of curiosity over achievement. We walked home together, both of us changed by the conversation and by the months of rebuilding our relationship. Emma met us at the door with excitement about her day at school, eager to share stories about her friends, her teachers, and her latest discoveries. Grandfather, Mom, I have something to tell you. What's that, sweetheart? Mrs. Rodriguez wants to nominate me for the regional science fair. She says my water filtration project shows real scientific thinking. Victoria's face glowed with pride. Emma, that's wonderful. Do you want to participate? I think so, but not because I have to or because it will look good on some record, because I want to learn more about environmental science and maybe help solve real problems. Those are the best reasons to participate in anything, I told her. And if I don't win, that's okay too. Mrs. Rodriguez says that presenting your work to other people is valuable, even if you don't get a prize. Victoria knelt down to Emma's eye level. Emma, I am so proud of who you're becoming, not because of your achievements, but because of your courage, your curiosity, and your kindness. Thanks, Mom. I'm proud of you too. Why? Because you learned how to cook, and how to help with homework, and how to read bedtime stories again. Because you chose us over fancy things. Victoria hugged Emma tightly, tears streaming down her face. I love you, sweetheart, just exactly as you are. That evening, as we sat around our small kitchen table, sharing a dinner Victoria had prepared herself, Emma made an announcement that surprised both of us. I've been thinking about Daddy's situation. Victoria tensed, worried about how Emma was processing Trevor's imprisonment and the family's financial collapse. What kind of thinking? I think maybe it's good that he's learning about consequences for his choices. Maybe when he gets out of prison, he'll be a better person. What makes you think that? Because sometimes people need to lose everything before they can figure out what really matters. Like we did. Victoria and I exchanged glances over Emma's head, amazed by our 8-year-old's wisdom and emotional maturity. Do you miss our old life, Emma? The big apartment, the private school, the expensive vacations? Emma considered the question seriously. I miss some things. I miss my riding lessons, and I miss having my own bathroom. But I don't miss feeling worried all the time about disappointing people. What don't you miss? I don't miss being busy every minute of every day. I don't miss having scheduled fun instead of just playing. I don't miss adults always talking about money and achievements and important connections. And what do you like about our life now? I like that we eat dinner together and talk about our days. I like that Mom reads to me and helps with homework instead of hiring tutors. I like that Grandfather teaches me things like cooking and fixing broken furniture. I like that we have time to just be together without any agenda. Victoria wiped away tears she couldn't hide. Emma, do you understand how much your happiness means to me? I think so. But Mom, I need you to understand that I can be happy in lots of different ways. I don't need expensive things to feel loved or successful. What do you need? I need to know that you're proud of me for who I am, not just for what I accomplish. I need time to explore things I'm curious about without worrying about whether they're useful for my future. I need to feel like our family loves each other more than we love things or achievements. You have all of that now, sweetheart.
And you'll always have it, regardless of what financial challenges we face. Good, because I think we're richer now than we were when we had lots of money. How do you figure that? Because we have each other, and we're happy together, and we help each other instead of competing with each other. Out of the mouths of babes. Emma had articulated something that Victoria and I were still learning to understand. True wealth had nothing to do with bank balances or material possessions. It was measured in the quality of relationships, the depth of satisfaction in daily life, and the security that comes from knowing you're loved unconditionally. The months that followed brought their share of financial stress and practical challenges. We consolidated into an even smaller apartment to reduce expenses. Victoria took on additional bookkeeping clients to increase her income. I continued working night shifts at the hospital while also doing odd jobs on weekends to earn extra money. But we also experienced joys that our previous life had never provided. Family game nights without scheduled conflicts. Cooking experiments that turned into cherished traditions. Long conversations about Emma's dreams and fears and discoveries. Quiet evenings reading together instead of rushing between activities. Emma thrived in her new environment. Her confidence grew as she realized that intelligence and creativity were valued more than perfection and competition. She developed friendships based on shared interests rather than social status. She discovered talents in art and music that her overscheduled previous life had never allowed her to explore. Victoria found unexpected satisfaction in her work with local businesses. Her financial expertise helped small entrepreneurs navigate challenges and grow their companies in sustainable ways. She felt useful, valued, and proud of work that contributed to her community's economic health. I discovered that supporting my family through their transition was more rewarding than any career achievement I'd ever experienced. Watching Emma blossom and seeing Victoria rediscover her capacity for joy made every financial sacrifice worthwhile. The legal complications eventually resolved themselves in ways that were less catastrophic than we'd feared. A victim compensation fund established through Trevor's plea agreement covered a portion of the education loan debt. Victoria's meticulous documentation of our financial circumstances helped us negotiate a payment plan that was manageable, if not comfortable. Most importantly, we learned that financial setbacks were survivable when faced by people who genuinely supported each other. Our cramped living quarters and limited resources became sources of creativity rather than shame. We found entertainment in free community events, discovered the satisfaction of growing our own vegetables, and developed a deep appreciation for simple pleasures. 1 year after Victoria and Emma moved to Millfield, we received an unexpected visitor. Trevor, newly released from federal prison and participating in a supervised reintegration program, requested permission to see Emma. The conversation about this visit revealed how much our family had changed. Victoria's first instinct was protective rather than vindictive. Emma's response was thoughtful rather than emotional. I found myself focused on what would serve Emma's best interests rather than my own feelings about Trevor's past behavior. "Do you want to see him?" Victoria asked Emma gently. "I think so, but not because I miss him or because I want things to go back to how they were, because I'm curious about whether he's learned anything from his mistakes. What would you want to say to him?" "I'd want to tell him that we're happy now, even though we don't have as much money. I'd want him to know that making good choices matters more than making profitable choices." The visit took place in a neutral location with Victoria present. Trevor looked older, humbler, marked by his experiences in ways that suggested genuine remorse rather than calculated self-interest. He listened as Emma described her new school, her friends, her interests in science and art. "Emma, I want you to know that I'm sorry for the choices I made that hurt our family. Thank you for saying that. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that seeing you happy and confident makes me feel like maybe something good came from all the bad things that happened." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you seem more relaxed, more yourself, than you ever did when we had lots of money and fancy things." Emma nodded seriously. "I think having less stuff but more time together is better for families. I think you're right about that." The conversation continued for about an hour, with Emma sharing stories about her life while Trevor listened attentively. There was no discussion of custody changes or future plans. Trevor seemed to understand that his role in Emma's life would be limited by the consequences of his past choices. After he left, Emma processed the visit with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I'm glad I saw him, but I don't want him to be part of our daily life." "Why is that?" Victoria asked. "Because our life is good the way it is now. We've learned how to be happy together, and I don't want to risk that by adding complications." "Do you forgive him for the mistakes he made?" "I think so, but forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you again." Victoria and I exchanged glances, marveling at Emma's emotional wisdom. At 9 years old, she had developed insights about relationships and boundaries that many adults never achieve. As we settled back into our routine after Trevor's visit, I reflected on how profoundly our lives had changed. 18 months earlier, I had been a lonely man facing foreclosure and cancer treatments, estranged from the daughter who was ashamed of my blue-collar values and modest lifestyle. Now, I lived with my daughter and granddaughter in circumstances that were financially challenging but emotionally rich. Victoria had rediscovered the satisfaction of meaningful work and authentic relationships. Emma was growing up with confidence, curiosity, and clear values about what mattered in life. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. We'd all made mistakes, struggled with adjustments, and faced moments of doubt about our choices. But we'd worked through difficulties together, supporting each other through the inevitable challenges that come with major life changes. Most importantly, we learned that happiness doesn't require financial abundance or social status. It requires honesty, kindness, mutual support, and the willingness to prioritize relationships over achievements. Emma's science fair project about water filtration earned her a regional award, not because it was the most sophisticated entry, but because it demonstrated genuine scientific thinking and practical application. Victoria started a small consulting business helping other families navigate financial crises and budget management. I continued my hospital work while also volunteering with a local literacy program. Our lives weren't perfect, but they were authentic, purposeful, and filled with the kind of daily satisfactions that money can't buy. We discovered that true wealth lies in having people who love you unconditionally, work that contributes to something larger than yourself, and the security that comes from knowing your values align with your choices. The courtroom doors burst open with enough force to rattle the brass hinges, and there she stood, my daughter Victoria, 28 years old and radiating the kind of fury that could melt steel. But this time, instead of desperation in her eyes, I saw determination. She wasn't coming to demand my signature on documents that would save her daughter's expensive education. She was coming to tell the federal judge that we'd found something more valuable than what we'd lost. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "my family would like to address the court about the victim impact of financial fraud and about recovery that goes beyond monetary compensation." I watched my daughter stand before the court with dignity that had nothing to do with designer clothes or corporate credentials. She spoke about the importance of integrity, about the value of simple honesty, about raising children who understood the difference between success and happiness. Emma sat beside me in the gallery, no longer the anxious child trying to meet impossible expectations, but a confident young person ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead with family support and clear values. When Victoria finished, she returned to sit with us. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, "for not giving up on me, for showing me what really matters." "Thank you," I whispered back, "for giving me the chance to be part of the most important thing I've ever accomplished." "What's that?" "Helping raise a granddaughter who knows her worth isn't measured by her achievements, and watching my daughter remember who she was meant to be." Emma reached over and took both our hands. "I love our family," she said simply. And in that moment, sitting in a federal courthouse dealing with the aftermath of financial crimes and legal complications, we were richer than we'd ever been when money was abundant and life was supposedly perfect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.